let me introduce some people here. So we've got Kate Norton, HR expert, works behind a whole series of businesses that are in-house HR. We've got Clive Pugh, who's the CEO of Winchester in Australia.
Thank you.
We've got Luzilla and Con. And we've got the cake.
We've got this amazing cake. We'll put it on LinkedIn later on in terms of get a close-up of it. But there is this, the less pretty version of you and I on there today. But this is a huge morning, 50th episode. So thanks for joining us. And
can I just say to you, to have a webinar effectively that continues to have over 100 people regularly attended. We've got a room of people next door who've attended everyone this year for breakfast, which has been really nice. You've got some presents, I think, for Clive and Kate.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, because they've gone enormous trouble getting here.
You want them to?
No, I want to give them to them now. Make them happy before we start.
Oh, here we go.
Oh,
here you go. This is for you. Thank you for making it
Right,
out
well done.
to sunny Carlton. And here you go, Kate.
Thank you very much.
I did say to someone, Andrew, that I was actually expecting a T-shirt as a gift, given that you've gone to extraordinary efforts today to actually show a dress standard that's commensurate with the 50th episode. So congratulations.
I can't get over how almost kind that was, Clive.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm sure people can see your shoes though. So.
Oh, true.
They're nice shoes. All right, well look, it is our 50th episode, so that's very exciting for us. We do have a sort of fun-packed sort of day. A heart of what we're talking about today in the case law is the role of communications in law and the importance of law and values in an organisation and how they should align and what happens when you don't get it right. So we're going to do that. We're going to spend some time with Clive, Kate and Karen talking about the changes in our environment as we're emerging out of COVID and what has been the impact. Clive's going to talk a little bit about what happens working in a multinational business and an Australian version of that and how that works and some of the real opportunities. Kate's going to talk a little bit around, well, what are the complexities of flexible work and performance, and she's got some incredible experiences around that which we want to hear, but also the learning that we get from it. And I think all of us agreed when we were chatting this morning, the big opportunity is that we are now in a position of change where we can really do something very positive for the organisation and not be drawn into the darkness of what we've had for the last year. So let's just jump in and I'll chuck some questions around without any warning as we go. The first case is Parish and St Kevin's School, which is a sort of sad case in a way of a teacher who touched a kid on a couple of occasions, downloaded some pornography when he was on holidays, and tweeted some things which were inappropriate. And what happened as a result of the first one of those incidents, the touch on the leg, is the school was required to notify a commission because it's a notifiable event in a school. The commission considered that, the school undertook an investigation. But what the school didn't do is do what it ought to have done right from that moment and said, when a child says they've been touched on the leg, I really need to speak to the child with their parents there and find out from the parents exactly what their feelings and connection are. This went on for a period of time, so the process was somewhat flawed and they ultimately terminated some time later and then got drawn into the media who are already looking at St Kevin's through four corners. Had this been done promptly and quickly, he would have been stood down immediately. There would have been trust given to the child, trust given to the family because a whole lot of facts emerged during the latter parts of the investigation. And a termination would have happened because any teacher who touches a child inappropriately is serious misconduct. And that comes back to that values issue, doesn't it, Clive? If you're there saying we protect and develop your children, you don't allow them to be touched.
No, if you have a value and you don't live the value, people see through that straight away. That's the whole point of having the values. And it's about teaching people how to live those values every day, every way. And our organisation's always taught that and reinforces values to underpin behaviour. Yep. And we use that in our everyday language and it works. It's not that hard.
No, and that values create a lawful and reasonable direction around behaviour. That's the legal rubric under which we work. So when someone breaches the value, if you live it every day, you are actually able to respond. You're able to do something. But if you condone it, or you try and hide it in fear of what damage that will do to the old institution of the school, then you get damaged reputationally and you end up in a complex case in the Fair Work Commission, where you win it because if it's a valid reason and it's serious misconduct, a failure in process will normally be overlooked. Yep. But why did you have to go through this complex process when the The moment of value is breached, it's a serious breach.
Mm.
What does that say to a parent group? This is not about St Kevin's, this is any school. What does that say to a parent group when the engagement is so slow?
Mm.
And that works for any of the businesses we're in, doesn't it, Kate? It's the same things. Next case is Kimber and Sapphire Coast Aged Care, and probably one we want to spend a bit of time on today, because this is the first case where somebody refused a flu vaccination. There was a government order, which exists throughout all of Australia, but Victoria, for aged care, that staff who work in them must have a flu vaccination. The person on health advice said no. The merits of that health advice was it wasn't a proper basis for refusing it. She refused to get the vaccination, they terminated her employment, and a single commissioner said, it's a valid, lawful and reasonable direction. You're creating such risk and safety circumstances by not doing it to yourself, but potentially to others. The termination is valid and it's fair. But what do we do with that, Kate, when we come to our organisations and we're fatigued by COVID, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I think it's fundamentally focusing on the safety first principles and coming back to the core responsibility that an employer has to provide a health and safety work environment for its staff. And in this situation in particular, this person's on reception in an aged care centre. It's just required to have that sort of thing. And then to understand perhaps her personal context and whether there really is a valid reason for her refusing it. I believe that the evidence that she provided was not at a level that satisfied the requirements.
But I guess for all of us, this is a chance to reboot, isn't it? Because I think everyone's tired, everyone's fatigued with COVID, but the risk is here for at least another year. And we need to get on the front foot, Clive. How do you do that? What do you do with your organisation to get them going? Okay, a sense of renewal around what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Andrew, because people have an expectation that we're coming out of what was an abnormal time back into a normal time. And we as an organisation have to make a conscious decision around what that normal looks like. And we have to bring our people along that journey. We do a fantastic job during the pandemic, communicating with people, telling them what the rules were, setting the expectations, working from home. We have one issue, but we didn't have any other issues with those people. As we're coming back now and as people have come back into the workplace, there's a reset and we have to go through a process of reset. But you're right, it's an opportunity to create positivity and that's what people are looking for.
And Karen, this requires under the safety law, whereas we change what we're doing. So as a mechanism of work changes, the obligation under safety law is to return to the risk assessment process. And we've provided a copy of that risk assessment process to you before, and please ask again. But it's critical, isn't it, Karen? This is a time where we go back, communicate, consult. It's a major change in work. People are starting to return to work. So under the award, it's also a major change time. Yeah. There is an obligation to say, this is what we think. That's the decision we make.
This is why I always come to these webinars, Andrew, because we go and do the bit about resetting, having conversations with our people. And as managers, we forget what the legal framework is. And we haven't gone and done formal risk assessments. So one of my takeaways today already is, oh God, I've got to go and do that.
I've just rung up the AW. They're there, Clive.
I'm just thinking I'm going back to all my clients to just say, look, we need to do a comprehensive risk approach here on what post-COVID work looks like for our workplace.
And can I just say that kicks into the second part, which is it then forms a change under the relevant award. So then you've got to say, look, this is what we're going to do. We've made a definite decision. And then you have to go and reconsult under the award. So it's a two-phase process. Now we are running very late today, so I'm going to deal with the next case very quickly. That's not. No, I'm not. There's no chastening in that. It's just it's a happy time.
Can we chasten him at some point?
Yeah. I feel chastened all the time. Okay, Yelda and Sydney Water Authority and Vitality Works is a case where a young woman at the Sydney Water Corporation said, "Yeah, I'm happy for you to use a photo of my face to support spine safety." Her face was actually stuck on a poster around Sydney Water, which had something about lubrication and was clearly a sexualised version, had nothing to do with spine safety at all. Not surprisingly, she was unable to come back to work. She brought a claim for sexual harassment and discrimination. She was successful. She was probably ill-advised and brought in a tribunal that had a capping of damages because the total damages were assessed at 320, but she only got 100. Had she gone to a powerful labour law firm, they would have gone in the federal jurisdiction. That would have given two things: much larger damages claim because it's built around common law damages, and has evolved. The damages have evolved much further than in smaller tribunals. And secondly, costs. So this would have been not a $320,000 case; it would have been a $700,000 or $800,000 case that Sydney Water and Vitality lost. But Vitality got it belting. So we've talked about communication in two ways. We've gone from St Kevin's getting in early, communicating accurately and precisely, and aligning with the law. We've talked about emerging from COVID and the need for communications to align with the law. Here was a case where once Vitality knew they were in trouble for doing the wrong thing, instead of doing the obvious thing, which is to give just a really sincere apology, take it, do everything to fix it up, they gave what was described as a weasel word apology, and for that they suffered aggravated damages. Now, aggravated damages are very rarely given in discrimination tribunal, and it's an emerging part of damages. But again, in the federal jurisdiction, it would have been more. And they should have been punished for doing it, because what is the first lesson we all learn in business when we do something wrong?
We apologise.
We own up. We own up and apologise straight away, and make very clear that we're not using weasel words. We don't say regret when we mean sorry. We say we are sorry, and we show it in the way we behave. This case probably would never have got to court had there been an appropriate apology. This woman probably wouldn't be damaged and would be back at work.
So do you think there's a reluctance to apologise because of the fear of the law, and that one of the things they could have done was go to a law firm for advice and say, hey, we think we need to apologise, what's the right way to do that? Is that, I think that that's what we would do.
Yeah, and I'm not sure all law firms would give the same advice that I would. I'm fairly fearless for my clients and for myself, because I've had to apologise for mistakes I've made. That the risk of you being sued because you apologised is minuscule.
Yeah.
Because, I used to do medical negligence work, and the first thing we used to train surgeons to do is when they made a mistake was to go to the patient when the person was lucid and say, look, I've made a mistake. And they never sued. It's the surgeons who never apologised and then disappeared who used to get sued. So the answer is there's risk when you admit liability, because that's what it is. But the risk is much higher when you don't. And this is it's a good question, because this is a case where if they had apologised, taken it down, if they had written around and said that we've done a shocking thing to this woman, if they built a communication strategy about getting her back to work and feeling safe, there would have been no litigation. They would have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs and the penalty and the massive reputational damage. Whenever Vitality go for work again in the communications industry, their competitors are going to go, well, we don't do shit like this. Yeah?
And I think it's a little bit like in our pre-discussion before we came on here, where you talked about what the values are of the company, and actually addressing that first before you get your legal advice, and understanding that you want to use the legal platform to reinforce what your integrity and your values demand of you.
And remember, the law is built on values. So law is built on a policy direction from a government that's drawn from a democratic process that says this is a good thing. So it's actually, the law aligns very easily with good values, because it's where it comes from. Now, we're presently running wildly behind. So I'm going to throw over to you, Clive, we're talking about opportunities around flexibility. You've had some great success in it. Could you give us your views? Before we came on, we talked about the only flexibility provision that exists is people returning from parental leave. And that's been misused. I think we all agree the business case to say, no, you can't come back full time has been overused. You've turned that around completely at Winchester. What have you done?
Well, strangely, COVID presented an opportunity to engage with people more frequently about the issues, about staying away from work, social distancing, hygiene, all of those things, because we had to. What we found was that it raised questions about, well, what am I allowed to do? So all of a sudden it put a focus on, well, we actually don't have a policy for that. We did have we did have a parental leave policy, but we didn't have a working from home policy. And all of a sudden we've gone back to policy mode. But one of the things we made sure we did was have a conversation with every single person. We did a survey, and okay, we only employ 35 people nowadays, but we spoke to every person. We did a survey, asked them what they wanted, and then we subsequently sat down around annual review time and said, well, what is it you actually want to do? And what does that look like? And Karen, I think you made mention of this around, you've got to put structure around the flexibility arrangements. And that's exactly what we've done. Interestingly enough, people themselves, or employees themselves, said, we want to have certainty around what the arrangements are for other people. We want to know what they're doing. There's kind of a bit of an underbelly there that says, I want to know that that person at home's not skiving off. You know, there's that kind of sort of feeling. Funnily enough, as managers, we never had that because we always entered this from a point of trust the employees to do the right thing and they will do the right thing. And so engaging with people and having a formal conversation around their individual flexibility arrangements has pushed us to enshrine what those flexibility arrangements are. And interestingly, it's not gender specific. It's not about, well, it is partly about looking after children or dogs, or in one case, we've got a guy who's got a partner who's unwell at the moment. So it's automatic to provide that flexibility for them. And those people that have young children aren't just women, they are men. And we're now seeing equally those people accessing those flexibility.
I know, and that's social growth is just fantastic.
It is terrific.
Yeah. Now I'm going to swing to you because it raises the very issue of, well, we have flexibility and we know that the evidence is coming in thick and fast in COVID. We're seeing a dramatic decrease in people's mental health who are working remotely. So, you know, initially when people were excited, it wasn't so bad, but we're now seeing the people who were vulnerable before becoming much worse, much quicker. And the people who weren't so vulnerable before starting to lose engagement, feeling happy. And we're also seeing a decline in productivity coming through. And this comes to the heart of engagement performance, Kate. Now, you've been dealing with a number of businesses. What's your experience?
Yeah, I can see that people are really struggling with this, and in particular, our leaders, management team. And so I suppose the main thing for many of these organisations is to go back and look at how does work now work in your environment under the flexible arrangements, but also really understanding how your HR framework sits behind that so that you've actually got a platform to manage it. And then you need to make sure that you're educating your managers a lot more and giving them the conversational tools to be able to deal with people that aren't right with you. So it's, I suppose it's focusing more on outcomes and outputs than it is attributes and inputs in a normal environment. You're actually changing the way your performance framework is applied.
It's less surveillance.
Yeah, less surveillance.
Much more about opportunity and capacity. And
yeah.
I think that's right. And that's the successful organisations that are doing that. I think we're successful in doing it from what Karen's done. And it's also having structure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like without the structure, people just disappear down the road.
We took some of the structure online.
Yeah.
So using, I probably can't promote an online safety training management tool that we use.
Might want to know that later.
But we've actually embedded some of the training for our managers in that tool, to make sure that they go and do it, and we have a record that they've done it. And we've done one for employees where we've embedded the acknowledgement of arrangements into that tool. So again, we've got a record that conversation has occurred and they acknowledge what's been told to them.
You go.
And I also want to say that you need to be really deliberate in identifying the way that you work and where are the key roles that actually lend themselves well to working flexibly. Where are the ones that it's going to actually be quite more challenging? So customer facing roles, just roles that require team interaction for a burst of collaboration and I suppose
close supervision and management and guidance.
That's right. So you really, as a business, this is a great opportunity to look at the way that you really work and how you can enhance
and to profile, to make sure, just like our vaccination issue, like who does have to be vaccinated, and who doesn't. You know, for those who don't, what are the protocol when they're dealing with other people? But I think the problem that all of this brings us to, Karen, is that working remotely has this problem that it's permeable. Personal things, dogs, children, partners, family, permeate into that work environment. And what we're seeing, there's a reason for this loss in productivity, and that is that people become distracted and engage in other things because the opportunity is there. And the primacy of work is still very important, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And the only way that you can keep that front of mind for people is it comes down to the engagement. So what I'm talking about there is managers having a stronger than ever relationship with their employees, understanding them, their lives, their work. So it's not, we have a structure in place to be able to support all this, but it's just the way that we work. And we know that it is always going to be work first when you're at work. And also when it's not because you can't, because your kids are unwell or stuff's going on, that you can have the conversation because, you know what, I'm going to take the day off because I can't be at work. But you don't have this terrible situation where, am I here, am I not here, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. It's extremely stressful. It's actually stressful for the employee and terribly, it's completely unproductive for the business as well.
And I think, for people like Clive and I have children who live at times in other parts of the world, we know that, don't we? There's a different engagement. The moment someone's at the end of a phone rather than in your home, the day-to-day shoulder rubbing, which is so much part of life, you've got to go way and beyond to actually keep that level of intimacy with people so they feel safe.
An interesting situation where an employee was unwell and said, oh, well, I'm just going to work from home today. You go, yes, but if you're unwell enough not to be at work, then you really shouldn't be working at home. I actually want you to put a sick leave form.
So we had exactly the same problem yesterday.
Yeah, and that's what I've seen as well.
Because otherwise they will work unproductively and then not use up their sick leave.
And then get sicker. That's
and
the
then get sicker,
Okay, so whack it up. We're into the case study. Well, that was actually surprising, but it's going to happen very shortly because Sophie can see we're all sitting here awkwardly. Sophie. No, that's not what. Yes, you're seeing the inner workings of a business that's on the run. Look at this.
Look at that, beautiful.
Yeah, that's actually Karen's. That's coming out to you. Now, I'm going to read out the case study from because we've got a broader setup. Jean is an executive assistant to Bree. Bree is the CEO of Washworks, a cosmetic manufacturer and distributor of clinical shampoos and conditioners for the aged care market. Before COVID, Jean was an excellent EA. She could almost read Bree's mind. She anticipated her needs and made her life easy. During COVID, Jean did what she was told to do. Bree's life was becoming more difficult and complex because Jean was not doing what she used to, which is the reading the mind part of it. Jean did not want to return to the office. She had poor health over the last few years, coughs and colds, and was terrified of dying if she contracted COVID from the people who visited Bree. Bree had consulted with Jean and eventually agreed to flexible work, but directed her to work every morning. She seemed to work closely with Jean around document preparation, diary management, and financial responsibilities. In April 2021, Bree had eventually directed Jean to return to work. Jean put in a stress claim and subsequently said that Bree and the HR manager bullied her. An investigation revealed that Bree and the HR manager had started off gently but became firmer in their requests. Jean took that to be harassment and that she was not being heard. The investigator found that Jean's concern about not being heard were understandable but not right, and it was reasonable to require her to attend work. The insurer agreed with the investigator. There was no bullying, and Jean's stress, as it related to her treatment by Bree and the HR manager, was not compensable. However, the workers' compensation claim was accepted because the HR manager failed to follow the process under the policies of the organisation, and the work from home policy was ambiguous. It was said the process failed because there was not reasonable management action. Now, just so you understand, remember in psychiatric claims or psychological claims, three things. Injury didn't arise out of the course of business. One, it's not a recognisable injury for the purpose of workers' compensation law, so it has to be a diagnosable illness. And the third one is reasonable management action, which means that she was not dealt fairly in a fair manner. So if I'm talking with Clive in performance management, the first question is it fair for me to talk to Clive about the issue I'm talking about? Is that fair? And then is the process fair? There's two fairness steps in that. So let's go to the poll. And here is the poll, and we'll just, it's all happening right in front of us here. It's pretty exciting.
Oh, okay.
So have a think about what you think the answers are. For my team here, I'll read the questions out quietly so I don't distract you. Was it lawful to require Jean to return to work in April 2021 whilst there was no government direction to work from home wherever possible? First question. Second, was Jean given procedural fairness as understood by law, but they failed to follow the highly prescriptive policies and procedures? Did Bree and the HR manager fail to provide reasonable management action? Now, it's a complex question, but what it really means is this. Procedural fairness and policy are two different things. The law recognises what is procedural fairness. policies may have a prescribed method of doing something which is more than what procedural fairness is. So if I fail to follow the policy, do I fail with reasonable management action? So that's the question. Could Jean's workers' compensation claim be terminated now as she has full capacity to work? She just refuses to go back to work. She says, terrible environment, don't want to go there. They've been horrible to me. So how are we going there? I think we're doing, can you see the numbers? Because I can't see the numbers.
Yep, I can.
All right, we might give it another, let's see. Okay, I think we're going to be closing it off here now.
All right, well, let's jump into this. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. If you can just blow that up so I can see what the results are. This is probably very sneaky and hard because this is a deliberate set of legal questions which I put in. The first question, was it lawful to direct Jean to come back to work in April 21 without government directions? So what does everyone think here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why can we do that? Because we needed to be at work. Her location and contract is at work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lawful and reasonable direction to do it. And can I just say, we haven't talked about this earlier, but we are going to need to update our contracts and processes, and as Clive said, policies, to make sure that the location of work and the expectation of returning to work are well caught in the contracts. Now, Jean got the question too, got procedural fairness, and in other words, they said, look, Jean, this is the issue we're dealing with. They gave it to her in a document so it was clear for her to understand it. They gave her an opportunity to be heard. They offered her a support person. They did all the procedural fairness parts, okay? But they didn't follow the policy. So is that a breach? Is that reasonable management action or not reasonable management action?
I think that's really challenging because part of what we're suggesting here is you need to make sure that your policies fit your behaviours. And yeah.
So
It sounds like it didn't.
Yeah. So here's the rub. As a matter of law, reasonable management action is procedural fairness. Okay. So if you feel the procedural fairness, I treat you fairly, and I follow a fair pathway, then you can rely on it. The only problem is the insurer looks at whether you followed your policies. And remember, stress-based claims are approved or disapproved by the government in Victoria, not by the insurer. And the insurer will not recommend to the government if you haven't followed your process to uphold your defence. So the answer is, please stop having overly prescribed processes. The law tells you how to do stuff. You don't need highly prescriptive policies and procedures because when you're under pressure, you always fail them. Okay. Could her claim now be terminated? She said, I don't feel safe coming back to work, but she has full capacity. What do you think?
I would have said yes.
Clive? I know this is a guess, so I'm just going
Yeah, I've got
to
a 50-50 chance. So
yeah, in my left hand.
based on what we now know, that procedural fairness wasn't given and the claim is accepted, then the answer is no.
No, but there's a trick. You
Oh,
see,
damn.
the trick here is
Good logic, I think.
everybody agrees there was no bullying and harassment.
Right.
Okay, so there is no reason she can't come back to work. She has full capacity. Workers' compensation is only focused on capacity, not on personal attitudes. It's called carriage. You do a carriage termination. So what you'd say is, look, you can come back to work. You can report to somebody else, not the CEO, but you're required to come back to work. She'd say no, and then you terminate the claim.
Right.
Okay, so that's a complex bit of law, carriage. It's very, very hard. And again, we do these polls deliberately to make it a little bit hard for you and actually see how you use the law, but also what are the risks of not knowing the law when you're dealing with people and managing them.
We were just following the script though. One person said no, one
That's
person
right.
said yes. So
That was it.
And everyone out there knows that's bullshit. And they can tell it's Clive who's doing it. I might wear t-shirts for a living, but Clive bullshits for a living. So, look, the things I wanted to take out of today, sorry, that was fun.
Yeah.
The things I want to take out of today is always go to your values, live your values, enshrine them in documentation and process, follow them when you get into conflict with people, understand how the law applies to that conflict, then look at reputational issues, then look at communications, and then make sure they follow your values. Don't try and hide, don't try and sneak out of stuff. Australian workers are actually quite hard workers, but what they require from you is honesty. And if a boss is dishonest, that is the end of the relationship. And it's not something you can win back. Now, we are on time. We're rolling out the training program next week. So we're going to talk about training, and you'll get some really handy updates about what's going on for the next week. But
We
thank you
didn't
for
have
joining us.
time for Karen's Corner today, but we'll do a.
Yeah, we
Well,
still
that
want the
next
name of Karen's Corner because she still objects to being put in a corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. Poor childhood, that's the problem.
Mhm.
Okay, off to eat the cake. See you later, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Bye.
Kate, Clive, Karen.